Hello, and welcome home to the X Life Podcast. My name is Christine, and this show is where we get to talk all things love, friendship, health, fun, and personal growth. This episode is all about trying to see the big picture, opening ourselves up to seeing the big picture in order to get excited for your divorce. Because trust me, I know right now it's really hard to find yourself getting sucked into the dark and negative side of all of this. But I'm here to help you change your thoughts and your focus so we can also have some fun and good times along the way. So let's start by talking about areas where you have compromised and settled in your relationship. We know that it's something that we all do to try to work through things, and a lot of times there's either healthy compromises or unhealthy compromises. So maybe take a minute right now, really think about big compromises you've made in your relationship. And somewhere they may have initially seemed like a good compromise, but then later you don't feel so good about it, and you may feel bitter and resentful and even hurt that you put yourself out there making that compromise. So it's important that we recognize these compromises right now, so that looking forward into the future, maybe we can avoid making the compromises that you aren't happy with anymore. So I'm just going to take a few seconds. Let's take about 15 seconds to think about this. Think about what's made you uncomfortable. Maybe where you feel like you've been persuaded to give in, give up, or go against what you truly want. Okay, I think that's been 15 seconds. Anyway, so I'm going to give you a situation that I just thought of. And it's one where, well, I'll just give you the situation and then we can talk through how I feel about it afterward. So I was in a relationship, and it started out like gangbusters, and I was being so understanding because I really felt like this person was a serious partner and we were going to be together. And he was going through a difficult time at work, very, very busy, and I tried to be very understanding. But as time went on, he just pulled back more and more, and there was less to very little to hardly any communication. And I really felt like I compromised too much on what I needed, and I let this behavior go at the time, and I shouldn't have, because I should have held him to a standard of, if you're this interested in me, I expect communication, this type of frequency, I expect to see you. And so while I don't entirely blame myself, I do recognize and acknowledge that I compromised on what I wanted and what I needed for this person. So I, going forward, never let that happen again. I'm not saying it's bad to be kind and understanding and patient, but when you're doing all the giving and they're doing all the taking, that is a red flag for me, at least. So I want to show you a life wheel that I've been using, and it's really been helping me to, like I said, look at the big picture and know that my life is not just my relationships, because I, for years, was so involved in just my relationships. Like, that was the end all be all. The others were a smaller piece of the pie, but that was so huge. And I realized that I needed to identify my life wheel, what was important to me, and make sure that I am feeding myself in all of these areas. So while we're talking about compromising and settling, I'm also looking at these areas because this is where I can look at where I've made compromises and settlements in the past and where I need to do better going forward. So I'm just going to read the areas of the life wheel. So the one we just talked about was love and romance. Then we have family and friends, fun and relaxation, personal growth, health and well-being, career and passion, money, and physical environment. So let me just show you what I'm looking at. And this is really a useful tool, at least for me. And if you would find it useful, you can take a screenshot, or more simply, I'm going to add a link in the description below. So let's take a closer look at each section and go through them together. I'll give you some examples. And I know that it's easy to let one or two sections kind of draw all of your attention right now, particularly while you're in this divorce phase. Love and romance section is going to be huge, but there are going to be other sections that are going to draw your attention, and then other sections that are going to need your attention. And that will, by fueling these areas, give you the strength to move forward. So I also want to explain why it's important to look at all the areas. So all the areas of the life wheel as a whole are important because, and I reference a song that really brought it home for me. It's called The Bones by Maren Morris. And the big line in that song is, when the bones are good, the rest don't matter. And that's so true, whether you're talking about a house, and in this situation, she is talking about a relationship. And she's saying when the bones of a relationship are good, the rest don't matter. And in this situation, it's when the bones are good with you and your solid foundation is there, the rest don't matter, meaning that you won't allow yourself to be weakened by the little things you might have once let weaken you. Like in my example, it was relationships. If something went wrong in a relationship, I was down for the count. Whereas if you're fueling all these areas and you feel like you're rich in these areas, you're going to find peace and happiness in everything, not just the relationship you happen to be in, which is why it's so important now to try to work on these as you're going through this divorce phase. Realize where you've made the compromises and think about what you may want to do differently going forward, because now it's just you and you make all the decisions. You're the boss. So that's exciting because no one's going to be forcing you to make decisions that you don't want to make or compromises you don't want to make. So as I go through, I'm just going to give some examples from my life where I've made compromises, and hopefully that'll help to get your brain firing and thinking about, oh, okay, that sounds like something I may have done, or that's exactly what I did, or, oh, okay, well, I can think of another way, but I get what she's saying. So let's start out with career and passion. So, and I start with this area because this is where I made the biggest compromise. And the story I'll tell you is I was in high school, and this was a long time ago where college wasn't as necessary as it is now. Now you need a degree to pretty much do anything or go anywhere in life. Not every career, but a lot of careers. And back in the day, that wasn't the case. However, I got good grades. I worked really hard in school, and I really wanted the college experience. I really wanted to maybe do something in English and literature, maybe write, maybe be a journalist in some way. That was always my cup of tea. So I assumed I would be going to college because I got really good grades and I worked hard and I was a good student. And one day my parents sat me down and they basically said, well, no, you know what? I don't know that it started there. I think it started with me meeting with a school counselor. We were talking about where I would want to go to college and what I would need to do to finish up and have the best grades possible. So I went home, and when I was having a conversation with my parents, and they said, well, we don't have money set aside for you to go to college. And I was shocked. Like, why was I working so hard to get good grades? Why was I being such a good student? Why was I spending hours on homework? What was all this for? So I was really taken aback. And at the time, it was, my parents were middle income, modest family, coupons, all of that stuff. But I mean, we had everything we needed, but it wasn't like there was a lot of money in terms of me thinking, oh, well, I'll just ask them for the money or whatever. And then I also knew just that it wasn't something where I necessarily wanted to take out a college loan. I've heard horror stories about that and how people don't pay them off for decades. And I didn't want to start my life in debt. So I really felt like my life was directed onto a path I didn't really choose. I mean, they just basically were like, well, you have to get a job. And I had a job at the time, but it was a retail job. It wasn't like I saw a career coming out of that. So I really had to start all over, rethink what I possibly could do to find a career. But all those dreams I had needed a college degree at the time. So I was pretty crushed. And it really set a pattern for me in terms of my career and letting it be guided for me rather than me guiding my career and taking risks and taking chances and following a passion, quite frankly. So I don't know if you share any similar stories about that, but that was a huge compromise where I made it within myself. And I don't necessarily regret how my life has, transpired. I don't really regret the paths I've gone down because I wouldn't be here today. However, I do wonder what if sometimes. So that's a really big compromise. So that was a big one. And I think that there's maybe a big compromise for everybody where they can look back and say, this pivotal decision, this pivotal compromise was something that changed my life, changed me, not necessarily in the better at the time, but it really changed the direction of my life, changed who I am, changed how I act. And I think that it's important to recognize that. And it's never too late. It's never too late to change any compromise you may have made. You can always do something different. And that's why I'm talking to you now, because I'm pursuing a passion. And part of my life, all my life, I've been helping people in different ways. So that's really a huge passion for me. So very important to try to find something, whether it's your full-time gig or a side gig, at least for me, where I feel fired up and I feel inspired and energized. So going from that, let's talk about money. This is always a sensitive, challenging topic for a lot of people, a lot of relationships. And I just want to talk about an aspect of money where I did compromise for years until I came to where I am now. So initially, in my first marriage, I was young, I was very traditional, and you joined your money together. That's just how it worked. And it was fine. I mean, we were comfortable and everything like that. And at the time, I think he made more money. Well, I know he made more money than me, but you did all the same things. You put each other on your credit cards, all of that stuff. So when it came to getting divorced, it was terrible. One day, I was notified that my credit card that I had had my whole life had been closed by my soon-to-be ex. And that was very upsetting for me because not only was it my only credit card, but it was also like a soft place for me to land in case I needed credit for any reason. I had that card and then I didn't, right? It got shut down. So putting money together after that was not a viable option. And then I went to, 2 bank accounts, and then kind of a shared account where you put money together. And that was okay, but I still felt like there was that extraneous money in the joint account and, you didn't really have control over it. And as I got older, I realized that I liked my money to be solely handled by me, all of it. So if I needed to pay for something for the house or pay toward bills, I could do that. I just channeled money, especially in this day and age. There's cash apps and all of those things. So that worked out to be the best outcome for me. But I really did compromise along the way for the other person. And this was the compromise I came to that I feel comfortable with. So family and friends is next. Family and friends is interesting because back in the beginning of my relationships, particularly the first serious relationship, I think everybody goes through a puppy love stage where there's the emoji with the heart eyes. That's all you can see is your love and your relationship. That's all you focus on 24/7. And quite honestly, when I was younger, my friends just faded into the background. They really did. It was unfortunate. And it wasn't as easy to stay in touch back then. There were no cell phones. You literally had to pick up a house phone and get on it and make a phone call. And I was trying to be a good wife and just a good partner and take care of my home. And I really didn't think that about not giving the attention to my friends that I should have. I mean, they didn't get married. I did. But my marriage was my only focus. So, yeah, that was something that I compromised on. And I think it's relatively normal for a lot of relationships where you get caught up in the moment and you may let friendships slide. But back then, I kind of let them all slide. And when I was headed for that divorce, it really was an eye-opening experience because I realized I really didn't have the kind of support I needed. And then I realized my friend pool had dwindled so much, like I needed to find new friends too, because now I was single again. So that was my experience with friends. The other thing that might be helpful is to think about whether or not your partner and your friends get along. Because I know sometimes when the friends and the partner don't get along, you end up not spending time with them. And then there's a drift. You drift away from each other that way. And you felt like you've had to choose your man over your friends. Or he's pressured you to do that. So that's kind of complex. And we'll talk about the friend issue more in upcoming episodes because it really is important to have that support right now. If there's any situations that you feel would be helpful to talk about, comment down below and let me know, and we'll do that. Physical environment. This is an interesting perspective where I definitely made compromises. I think with the advent of HGTV and renovating homes and everything looking perfect, and it seems like everybody is completely willing to give up everything in their house. Like, I don't know about you, but they literally clean out every little item and replace it with all new stuff. So, for example, coming out of my first divorce, we were splitting things up and you're taking maybe things that are more practical, which is what I did, versus, like, I can think of an example, like I chose a microwave over a painting that I loved. And I loved that painting so much. But I needed the microwave. So I chose the microwave. And I've kind of always been very practical. Like several years ago, before I met my husband now, I kept thinking about this brown leather couch and how much I wanted it. And I had this couch already, and it was great. It was comfortable. It was practically brand new. And I just couldn't allow myself to throw it away and get something new just because I wanted it. Because this couch was still fine. It was still very comfortable. So I still have it. And a little irony here is that when I met my husband, he had a brown leather couch. So, it worked out. However, along the way, when you have relationships and then you break up and then you move on and you don't have something, you don't really have the money, and people give something to you or you find something cheaper, you kind of end up with a hodgepodge of things in your house, which is what happened. And there's also a lot of sentimental things. So while I don't have the perfect house, the compromise is that, and this is a healthy one. This is one where, for me, in the end, it's kind of okay for now because the sentimental items mean a lot to me. They're from family members that aren't here with us anymore, or they remind me of certain times, or they've traveled with me for decades. So, they're good quality pieces of furniture, etc. Like, there's so many different things that go into what I've carried with me that it's hard to say I'm completely unhappy with my home and my physical environment. But it just has been a compromise because I'm not willing to completely out with the old in with the new. So I don't know if you relate to any of that, but that's kind of where I am with the physical environment compromise. Personal growth, this is kind of a compromise, really, because, and I've talked about this before, I've been personal growth junkie for years, from Tony Robbins back in the day on VHS tapes and late night TV to now. I still love to learn and grow every day. I still just want to be a better person all the time. And so I like to read, I like to watch things, any little thing. I'm always open to growing. And I can honestly say that most of my serious relationships, the man has not been like that. They haven't had a growth mindset at all. Kind of fixed, actually. So that's been a big compromise because it's something that's really important to me, but I don't require it in a partner. And I've also realized along the way that you just can't change a person anyway. So the best I can do is to learn and grow myself and make myself happy. And then I can bring that happy person to my relationship. So I think that's very important. Love and romance, we kind of covered that earlier. Then we have fun and relaxation. This is something that's still a struggle. I still make compromises. I don't know if you can relate, but I've tended to go with the flow with doing what my partner wants to do. Or I also can remember being really rigid at times where they wanted to do something and I was absolutely against it. So in my current situation, my current marriage, my husband has a side gig that requires a lot of time. And I used to just go all the time whenever he had one of these gigs. And then I realized that there were things I wanted and needed to do. And it was a lot of my time, particularly on weekends. You have such few hours on the weekend, really, for yourself to do things you want and need to do. So finally, I started saying no, and I started just picking and choosing. And it's made me a really happy, more fulfilled person to really invest in myself. And that might be just me wanting to rest. It doesn't have to be, I want to clean the house top to bottom or anything like that. It can literally just be like, I'm tired and I need to stay home. So I have really stood my ground with that, and I'm really happy about it. And it's still a struggle sometimes for my husband, but it gets easier. And I'm really enjoying the time that I get to myself. So that's really important too. The last section is health and well-being. And I feel like so many people compromise, especially in relationships. And there's multiple ways you can compromise in a relationship. I'm going to take a drink. So you can compromise with your health and well-being in so many ways. Beginning of relationships have always been a time to compromise for me because you're having a good time. You're starting to feel something for this person. The feelings grow. You're out. They're whining and dining you, dating you. You're eating out all the time. And you just don't eat the same that you would if you were making food for yourself at home. It's usually way less healthy. If you drink alcohol, you're drinking a lot more alcohol than you normally would. And so you kind of put on this happy weight. Or your partner may choose to cook, and it may not be things that you would normally eat, but you eat it because you do like that stuff. It's just not healthy for you. And then you have a family and you're cooking for your family. So maybe they don't like to eat as healthy as you do, and you just kind of eat what they're eating, especially with kids. So I have done some really healthy compromising here, meaning that I have put my health and well-being in the forefront more recently, actually. I've really gotten more firm with making sure that I cook for myself and I meal prep for myself, even if it's me doing it on my own time and me doing extra work. It's important that I have that healthy food there so that I don't just resort to eating, what I call the junk. For me, I've discovered that when I eat crappy food, I feel crappy. And that's the truth. I feel a lot better when I'm eating healthy. And also, something I stand firm on, but I kind of have compromised this year, is exercise and moving my body. And that's looked all different ways throughout my life. It's from the gym to workout classes to working out at home. And that primarily started during COVID, like everybody else, but it's changed. And earlier this year, I had a back issue, and I really had a hard time with not being able to work out for a while. I mean, I couldn't really walk comfortably. So I did minor exercises, and I mean minor exercises. In no way was it considered working out. But then after that aggravation was over, I realized I had to be kinder to my body. As I'm getting older, I'm realizing that I can't go as hard as I could before working out. I couldn't work out in certain ways. I watch the movements I make so I don't irritate something. So that is a compromise that can be uncomfortable. For example, I really didn't feel like I was working out, when I wasn't going as hard. And then I just started to realize, but my body needs me to be more gentle right now. I think I'm going through the change of life, and that's fun. So I really am just being kinder to myself, and it's fine. My body is reacting very well, but that's a compromise I didn't really want to make, but I was forced to make by my body, and I understand that. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that they can make compromises like that to feel good. And that's the most important thing, is to feel good about yourself. So I have a story about eating too, I wanted to share. And my husband makes fun of me all the time because if you've seen the movie When Harry Met Sally and Meg Ryan is ordering at the diner, it takes her a while. And my husband always is like, oh my gosh. So here's my husband. I'll have the hot roast beef with gravy, mashed potatoes. And here's my order. Well, I'll have the salad, but please remove the onion. And I don't want any croutons, no green pepper, salad dressing on the side. This is the salad dressing I want. So I am very particular because I found foods that don't agree with me, so I don't want to order them. And I've also found foods that make me feel better. So they're there to make what I want, right? So I order it the way I want, and then I'm happy. So he just makes fun of me, but it just means, like, stand up for yourself. Don't be afraid to speak up and say what you want in these areas. So that's a lot to take in, isn't it? And hopefully along the way, you have found something that, wow, that sounds familiar, or, oh gosh, I need to remember that. And right now, I'm hoping that you have some thoughts rolling around in your head. You have some things firing up there. And I want you to go write them down right now, because this is important to understand the compromises that you've made, and even compromises that maybe you want to make in the future. And it's important because this is you. Your life wheel is important to look at every area. And recognizing where you've compromised, or where you want to compromise again, or where you may not want to compromise again, is going to shore up that foundation to support you during this time. It's really important that we work on all of you. So let's go on to the next episode, and we're going to figure out how to take the next step. So let's jump into part 2. I'll see you there.